Hello and welcome to this analysis of whether haute couture can be made digitally with the help of AI. So I've been looking at real haute couture over the last 2 weeks. Anything from Chanel and Dior were all on my channel. But when I was researching it, I was just looking who else was designing, because couture isn't, my specialism. I enjoy looking at it, but there's always new designers or designers I haven't looked at before. So I just went through the whole list and I came across the most recent, so Spring 2026 Haute Couture collection by Alexis Mabille. And it came to a real surprise to me. And I'd be interested to see what you make of it as well. I'm going to show you some images. And hello, Natalie. And hello, Suzanne. Lovely to have you on here. So let's have a look at some images. So, sorry. Here we go. So this is the catwalk. So at first you think, yeah, maybe just like with photoshopped or something. It might be quite old-fashioned. But this is completely digitally created and designed with the help of AI. And what that means is, so digitally created fashion or digitally pattern cut, digital pattern cutting has been around for years, and it's really efficient, especially for ready to wear, because you can make changes straight away. You can send your PDF to the factory, wherever it is, and they can work from it. And it's really streamlined. It saves time, it saves money, it saves material. So it makes complete sense. So I'm not anti-digital. Even AI can be a great tool. The question here is whether AI and haute couture, which is really all about the craftsmanship, about the people putting something together by hand exactly for you, are that perfect combination, or whether we better using digital for ready to wear. So that's really the analysis, and I'm going to go through it and maybe sort of talk about where it sort of falls short, because it is very perfect. And I think that's one of the problems I have with digital and AI in general, that whenever you make something, the way the fabric wrinkles when you sit down, it's part of what makes it a real garment. And the whole thing about couture is having all these people working it, molding it to your body, but then the fabric is still fabric. It's imperfect, it will move, it catches the light differently. So digital takes away that human touch, that human connection, and maybe also the wearability of clothes. So as I said, digital pattern cutting has been around for years, and also what we had in the last 2 years is called it's called Clo 3D, but I think there might be some different programs as well. But it's basically a way of making digital models. So not just the patterns and the technical files, but also basically completely digitally created models and clothes. And there's a fantastic pattern cutter called Bias Cut Woman, and he uses it quite a lot. And it's actually a great tool for things like working out really new pattern cutting techniques and showing it. And it's stuff like even they develop the fabric so it looks realistically. And you can imagine, if you're working for a fashion company, you can then do the whole lineup, you can use the fabric swatches, make it so it looks realistically, and it gives you the first impression. That's actually a really helpful tool. It saves materials. Of course, you use a lot of cloud space and energy, so you always think where it's that more efficient as well, but it also saves a lot of time, because once you've got the programs and the systems, then it's probably faster than sending off to the factory, having your sample made, having to buy a roll of the fabric to work it out. So it is a real time and money saving tool. And of course, it's a first step. And then the models you like, you would make up in the real fabric, and then they might still not work, because when you try it on yourself, you might find something which you can't yet find digitally. So that's the sort of, I'm not anti-digital. I think it's a great tool, but whether it's suitable for haute couture. And the AI aspect with this collection is really that they used not just the design suits, so the digital pattern cutting ones, the Clo 3D, they also used AI to actually generate the silhouettes and things like that. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit strange. And if you look at it, it's all basically, it's all completely digital. It's all created with the help of AI. I think they used digital models of real models. Again, I think only one of them maybe, and one of them is his mother. So again, as Natalie I think pointed out, models out of the job, but also of course the couture house, the studios who actually make it. When people make the embroidery, the buttons, the fabrics, they all have less of a basically job to begin with. So you can see it looks all quite beautiful, looks a little bit too perfect straight away. And I think it's that uncanny valley feeling we get with a lot of AI created stuff. So even there, you can see the look in her eyes is a little bit dead. So I always think that's a giveaway. And what's also a little bit of a giveaway, how perfect this is. Like the bow is completely symmetrical. And if you ever made anything like that, even if you make it completely symmetrical, the moment you start walking, it comes a little bit asymmetrical. And I think that's where it fails. It looks too perfect. It looks fake. And especially if you compare it to this one more, again with a bow, completely perfect. I'm going to actually zoom in for a second. And you can see it's even hard to work out how is this actually pattern cut. So there are the darts, there are the princess line. It's sort of blended in too much. The same with the embroidered dress with the symmetrical bow. It's sort of too perfectly fitted. And it's sort of, when you compare it, especially, I went back to the last haute couture collection I did in 24, I think. And you can see that is how it actually looks in real life. It has more wrinkles. It doesn't fit perfectly because the model is walking. And again, we have one more here. You can see it is a real contrast. Actually, if I move them around a little bit, just so we can see the comparison. So, because this is really the same, sorry. We got two softer garments and we got two harder garments. So the pink with the symmetric bow and the red, they're both maybe more constructed, but you can see the AI or digital one is so perfect. It doesn't really move. They might have created a little bit of movement as she walks on the catwalk, but in general, it sits completely still. And that's what makes it look weird. You can see the red one, it's got like a little bit of folds. It doesn't fit perfectly on the bust as she's walking. It's sort of creasing a little bit where the fabric behaves naturally. And with the pink asymmetric one, again, it's so perfect. Her whole body, they've put in a few sort of creases to show, oh yes, it's a real garment. But if you compare it to the blue dress on a real woman, it's a complete difference. You can see with a tight dress like that, you can see the silhouettes. It's a little bit of a different fabric, but still really different. And Natalie's saying, how do you wear that first bow jacket? Where is the opening to put on? That's a really good point as well. I mentioned it's got a center back zip, but these are always sort of things where you think, yeah, would this, if I move some of these away, on this dress, would the bow actually stay up like that? Or by the end of the catwalk, would it actually flop down much more? Because this has to be like super stiff. I read up on it, and apparently they made trials of all of these garments and they're ready to try on for clients. So by trials, we normally mean fabrics made out of, garments made out of either a calico, or maybe in haute couture it wouldn't be calico, it'd probably be a comparable fabric quite often, because you can't quite recreate it. But I would imagine by trial, it wouldn't have the embroidery, it wouldn't have the finishes. And I think that's what makes these garments are like so overly perfect. So if you see that when you try on a trial, and then you get back something which is really different, you know, and you're paying probably $20,000 or pounds, that's sort of, I wonder how that will work out. That's why I can see it really falling short, because it will look really different. It still be couture beautifully, but it won't be as perfect, as smooth as these images. And Natalie saying AI defies gravity. Yes, so it's sort of a whole thing how, because that's what I liked. I thought maybe, you know, maybe this is realistic, like, because if you look at the recent Dior show, they did really beautiful, you know, the sort of bow circular dresses. globe dresses, and they had a lot of inner constructions to stay up like that, but they look quite stiff. But if you compare it to the red one here, can you see how that's actually, it has, again, it's like very stiff, but the fabric doesn't stay like that. You can see the fabric has to go around the stiff surface. So yeah, so I think that'd be the real test, because of course he's just done that. We don't know yet how it's going to work out, but I think once it actually gets made into garments, then that will be a big shot. Again, this trouser jumpsuit, it's just a little bit too perfect around the bust. You can see I always like to put in like a few creases or folds, but if you've ever seen this looks like some sort of linen or silk or mix, then often after a while it really it moves to the body, and you could really see it. Sorry, I'm looking for the right image. This last Couture collection, again, here we've got a cotton dress. You can see straight away how the sleeves crease around the body, all these sort of things, which makes it a real garment. So I think these are all the sort of things where it's a little bit strange. Again, it's a little bit too perfect. I'm actually going to put it on the table just to show you what I mean. It's a little bit too perfect. And of course the sad thing is, like he said, it was as expensive as doing it traditionally, because they had to train the AI, because all what AI is a tool which you give it commands and it does what you want it to do, and it just collects the information and gives you an sort of a combination of everything that it can find online, and then using sort of learns from what it can see online. But it's not a foolproof tool. So apparently it took quite a lot of time just training the AI to do what they wanted it to do. But if you look at this one, I'm going to move it across a little bit like that. There's a few where I sort of was thinking, how does it actually work? So this looks like it's got a lovely shawl collar. So lovely, might be a shawl collar or a different collar. And then it sort of goes to a very low waist, deep collar. And again, it's just everything is completely flat. And I think, of course, when we fit, we want to achieve like as few wrinkles or lines as possible. But that's possible when it's completely standing still. As soon as you move around, there will be a little bit of movement, you know, and they've done a little bit in the skirt, but it's not really that realistic, is it? And it's got that sort of belt. And then it's got a very fitted skirt in this really embroidered, what looks like an embroidered silk, doesn't it? And if I move it up for a second. And I felt sorry for all because he said, yeah, they made at the studio, they made the trowels and things like that. So they still had work, but I wonder as well, I mentioned a lot of it is sort of outsourced, or they work with different ateliers to get it done. And then I wonder he had samples made at least, so you can see that's the fabric like and stuff. This is what it's going to look like, because otherwise, first of all, they're out of a job to a certain degree. And of course, the sampling is part of it. Like you make most money in production, but it's still all part of it. So yes, so good. They were saying I did a very neutral review. I said a good experiment, but people weren't that impressed partly. But it's always sort of questions you have. So it looks like that. If you've ever made a garment in your life, you know if you are a woman and you have curves, you can't just, out of a woven fabric, you can't make a garment like that. So you could make it out of a spandex or a really good knit fabric. You could easily make a skin-tight garment like that. On a woven garment, you would have to add some sort of seams. So you'd have a seam here. So I'm going to actually draw in the things. I don't know where they're coming from. And hello, Karen. And Natalie is saying, I would like to know what the buyers think about not being able to see the garments in real life. Yeah, especially the people who turn up to the show and then they're just shown basically like it was done on basically big surround screens. So all the people sitting in the background, they're all fake as well. They're not the real people watching it. So this was just shown on big screens all around the room. Like a surround, and you get it. He was saying it's like his other business as such is interiors and architecture, and he said use it all the time, and that's quite true. You use architecture models all the time, and of course, again, it makes sense if you're building a massive building, you want to get it perfect digitally first, so you not just suddenly start building and £5 million later you have an issue. But with fashion, I think because it is like architecture has to work for us to walk through, to live in, fashion is right on our body, clothes on our body. So it's a lot more intimate. And for ready to wear again, I can, digital 3D models work because they cut the supply chain. But then when you try it on the shop, it still has to work for you. So it still has to be made eventually. And that's what Suzanne is saying. Somebody has to eventually sew it for a customer. Yes, so that's the sort of, and you sort of think, if you stop sampling, do you lose all that? Do you lose some of the expertise? Because when you sample, that's where you experiment and try things out. And when you want to get it perfect for production as well. And sampling is where you make the mistakes to a certain degree, or you learn from them. So if I cut out that sampling stage, so I got the trials, but the trial is the first step when you make the actual sample in the right fabric, the right finishes, and you cut that out. How do you actually make sure the production or the couture garment is complete? So let's get back. So you definitely, like looking at it, you would have a center front seam most of the time, especially if you have a pleat here. And then you would probably also have seams, or you either have seams, especially if you've got some volume at the bottom, or you would have darts. So it could be, of course, that because this isn't a beaded fabric, you could hide all of it in it. But the way it works, you would so still properly see some sort of beads which follow the lines of the seam. And on this garment, it looks like it's completely flat. So what you sort of would expect where the beads meet, it sort of becomes like this. It becomes stitched in perfectly. But we need seams to get in and out of these garments. Again, here we've done a few sort of movement ones, but again, there's absolutely no shaping. So you would have to have, with something like that, I would imagine at least darts. But again, I would imagine maybe I should have done at least darts on this side, or you probably would again have a seam going like that. Because of course, if you have the beads, they look like they're going in lines like that. So having vertical stitch lines is easier than having darts and things, because you can just have the edge of the pattern piece. So again, how is it actually possible? And even with the sleeve, that's a really tight fitting sleeve, so that might even be a two-piece sleeve. So how does it all work? So stuff like that, you just think, yes, it's sort of not that realistic. And also, like, again, as Natalie was saying earlier, how do you get in and out? So I would imagine something like that has got a center back seam, maybe with a zip, because you want to be able to step in and out of it. Or alternatively, this might actually become undone. But again, it looks like it's all fake. It doesn't look like a working buttonhole or something that opens. And of course, even if it was open here, you would still need to have some sort of side seam closure, because again, there's nothing there at the front. So I find it quite fascinating when you start analyzing it, what actually works. This one I found really fascinating because up to now, everything has been too perfect. If I zoom in really close, can you see the waist of this dress? I found it a little bit badly made. And just to go back to this for a second, Natalie was saying if you had a center back zip, the collar would be in the way. Yeah, so that's you could have in vintage, sometimes they have like the collar which separates at the center back, but it's not ideal, I agree. So it would be quite a tricky construction. But again, it sort of looks like they must make the trial how to get in and out. But would you put it over your head and then have a side seam zip, or would you have some sort of back closure? Yeah, neither of that is sort of where you think, yeah, that's a really straightforward one. And of course, Couture, the whole point of it, but it is a little bit where you can't quite work out how it's done. What I found really interesting at this, so in this one, we've got, let's do in green again, we have got darts, but not actually a lot. So this is a really tight corset. And then it goes into that sort of typical princess line. But where I would draw it, and there you would sort of make it, you would try to make it pointy, or if you do it round, you do it equally round. And I found that really interesting because up to now it's been too perfect. If I really zoom in, can you see the point looks a little bit sort of uneven? And you know how sometimes AI glitches on the fingers and stuff like that? That's it looks where it's sort of where you think, oh yes, what happened there? Why? Like, I understand you wanted to have it look real, but that actually looks a bit like not quite pleasant. It doesn't quite work. And even like we have our seams here beautifully. Actually, it's a nice shape. And then of course we got a skirt here, and then we've got that sort of drapey look like that. So it's a classic sort of silhouette. And it goes like that. Again, these are all a little bit too perfect, aren't they? The way they're arranged. Because as she's moving, this would move with her and just move asymmetrically. It wouldn't stay that perfect. Also, what's quite interesting with a corset style like that, that will work well if you're quite flat. But otherwise, quite often with a corset, that's actually not a lot of seams. Quite often with a corset, we might have an extra panel here, or we actually have much more panels to get it that fitted. So it's possible. Again, it's possible to for a certain figure type. What they might have done is done a more classic corset underneath, like you get in Couture quite often, and then this is just on top, sitting on top, sort of molded on top with several layers. But it's sort of because it is so fake and this is bad, you sort of start to question everything about it. In this case, getting in and out would be easier. You probably have either a side seam or you have a center back seam. And Natalie saying how to get in and out was the first thing we taught us as fashion class. Yes, or how does the back look as well is quite important all the time. I just wanted to show you a few of the original ones as well. So this is again a real one. So this is 2024, and again you can see the sleeves wrinkle, the collar is beautiful, but again it shows its fabric. It moves with the model. So that's where it sort of becomes really interesting. Again, this was the Haute Couture show from 2024, and can you see how that coat is already wrinkled and it's drooping in places just because it's fabric with our body. And that's what makes it real clothes. I think that's sort of missing from these AI ones. Again, I showed you this earlier. And this again, these are all sort of like where you can see they're real garments. And if you look, for example, here at the cat one, if I zoom in and up, you can see how actually it doesn't fit that it's sort of moving, because as she moves, it automatically basically wrinkles. So it isn't always a sign of bad fit. It just means the garment, the fabric, which is softer in our body, molds itself, which is of course the whole point of it. So yeah, so I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well if you're watching the recording, what you think of this show. I think it's a little bit make-believe personally. It's sort of, you need the innovation, and haute couture has always actually been quite innovative when it comes to fabric construction. There have been people who sort of always pushed it forward. And again, digitally, it's a great tool, and probably some of the stuff might have already been done, you know, behind the scenes when you design the patterns for the embroidery, all these sort of things, the fabric patterns. That's all probably done digitally now. but at some point it needs to be made real. And I think the show was always, of course, part of it is advertising and marketing, but a lot of the show is also to actually show the buyers who are spending tens of thousands of pounds or dollars how the real garments look like. And this is sort of a bit like you have to really trust that designer or that couture house to then actually make it and look like that and not look completely different, because if you're making clothes yourself, then you often know that if you make a calico sample, for example, and when you make the real thing, it can look completely different, it can feel completely different. And we are trained in, or if you make clothes for yourself a long time, you realize it and you adapt to it. But if you're just somebody who comes in and you buy something, you often don't have an understanding of the differences between how the trial looks and how it fits and how the final garment looks like. And why would you? You know, it's something you learn from making clothes yourself or having lots of sampling done. But otherwise, I wonder where that's where it sort of breaks apart, when the clients actually say, oh, that doesn't look like the original image. You know, I think that's where it might break apart. And of course, it's also a little bit... it's quite a small market already, the high luxury. And then if we have the less fabrics being sampled, all these sort of things, because even, you know, it keeps the sort of the treat houses in business, is the sort of wholesale roles for the haute couture houses and stuff. And Karen is saying, nice top from the front view. A zipper could be put in the back of a green dress. Yeah, I agree with you. So I think I think they're probably thought it through because they have the trials, but it's sort of, I think AI is that, or that's a digital one, we can make everything perfect, and that's what makes it looks uncanny or a bit strange. Like the faces, you can see it's a person, but it's just a little bit wrong or too perfect. Yeah, Suzanne is saying, from being the best there is to plastic models on a computer. Yeah, it's sort of like, the thing is, I think for ready to wear, when you're having like a massive collection and, you know, you don't want to produce 1,000 models and all be wrong. Digital is great because you can just start cutting out already. And even if if you sample less, that's great. But haute couture it's the best of the best. It's all about the artisans, the craftsmanship, the ateliers, putting it all together by hand. And Anne is saying, have any of these been made? So I read the review in Women's Wear Daily, and they said that they've made trials. And as I said at the beginning, trials for me mean calico, or in haute couture it probably means maybe even the real fabric, but probably not all the embroidery, because otherwise why wouldn't you show those as well? If he's made the garments, then you would put them up as well or show them both. So I imagine they've made versions of it, and I think that's where it'd be interesting when it's actually made in real fabric. Yeah, Natalie's saying the buyers might not be happy to miss out on a trip to Paris. I think they still have the live audience. So, but you just sat in a room looking at the big screens. And then they still come to the studio and they have it fitted. So that's all still done in-house. And I think from what I've read, I think he's trying to basically innovate because he's trying to fundraise, get new investors. So this is something to really get people talking. And it makes sense for ready to wear. Is, if you could go into a shop and you or even before you go to a shop, you see everything online and you can sort of see how does it look on a real person, and then it could be made for you. It wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just with haute couture, that's not just made to measure, it's one step above made to measure, isn't it? So it's a sort of, I think down here, like ready to wear digital and 3D modeling has been used quite a lot because it makes everything smoother in the initial steps, and then you still make it in real life and you try it on before you go in production. But you sort of sort the wheat, you sort your wheat from your chaff, like in the fairy tale. But with haute couture, that it should be just the best of these, rather than having a massive collection and then not doing it all. And Natalie is saying, it will save a lot of upfront cost for designers. Yeah, so he said, the AI costs a lot. It was a team of 10 people, but I will imagine the AI company might have taken some of the costs. and supplied some of it. And of course, once he's got it worked out, the AI, then it saves money. The next collection he does it. So then, and it's all the sampling costs, like, because with fabric, I was only ever ready to wear, never couture. You have to buy, some companies have like 5 meters, but normally it's a roll, and especially couture, a lot of the fabrics are made for them, especially developed. Then you have to buy a roll. So, like if you think about Chanel or the tweeds, you buy several rolls, of the Linton tweeds, the Locaron tweeds, just to work out exactly which one you want. All the embroidery ateliers, the feather making ateliers, all this sort of stuff which has kept these skills alive. And haute couture is sort of the last step where it's being kept alive in France, because all the ready-to-wear, of course, has already all this sort of high-end techniques, all the beading, all this sort of beautiful stuff is all made in India or China. So you do keep the craftsmanships, craftspeople are there somewhere, but it's just I guess always changes. But it'd be sad if you lose that sort of Paris ateliers, that sort of tradition where you have somebody who's done it for 50, 60 years, like the lady who does the braids for Chanel, who's literally done it all her life. And that expertise, once it's lost, you can move the factory somewhere else or the atelier somewhere else, but you haven't got that person to say, oh yes, I remember 45 years ago we did that, and that technique works, and we haven't used it for a while. I think that is the pity. And I've got lots of comments saying, yeah, I prefer the real collection, the one from 2024. And I wonder whether there are constraints to what you can make. I think if I go back to the Tobias cut woman, I know they're all real clothes in the end. So I think you can just about make anything nowadays digitally. It's just because the pattern cutting has been done digitally for years and years. When the 3D modeling it should just be a version of the pattern cutting. I think and for ready-to-wear, where the techniques are really, it's just stitching and it's not very complicated. It works really well. But for couture, you have all the molding, how they stitch it by hand and stuff. I think that bigger problems. And Alicia is saying, and AI limits your creativity. Yes, I think as well. All these styles, they're sort of okay, but you can sort of see, because if you're in the studio, something goes wrong, or you're draping and something doesn't quite work out, but then it gives you a new idea. You're putting new fabrics together. Digitally, you never do it because you have the different files. So you never end up putting 2 ideas together, or you maybe having a fabric hanging next to a mannequin it was meant for, and then it gives you a new idea. So I agree. It's sort of ready to wear, but it's not that creative. It makes complete sense because it is business and it saves money. But haute couture is about all what makes fashion special, isn't it? So I think that is missing. So thank you so much for joining me for this analysis of, can haute couture be made by AI? I'm on the team, I rather not. It's probably possible, but I'd rather keep that tradition of excellence alive, and yeah, keep the digital and the AI to where it makes sense and it saves time and fabrics. But yeah, let's keep making beautiful garments, and even if we do it ourselves, keep it alive ourselves that way. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me and critiquing this AI collection.